Good afternoon. It is 4 o'clock, and I've been given the nod. We'll go ahead and get started here. I'll call our meeting to order. Request from city staff confirmation of COMA required notices were provided.
Yes, it was.
Thank you. Do a roll call of board members, starting with Denny down there at the end.
Denny. Matthew Smith.
Gabe Grant.
Jim Fletcher.
Melanie Hedgepath.
Brad Dix.
Thank you. Any guests we want to introduce, sir?
We have two guests that will be speaking during the new business portion.
Okay.
Jane Anderson with the I'm not sure of your title, Jane, but I will let you introduce your title, with the Smoky Hill River Foundation. And then we also have Salina Tennis Alliance, who will be doing a presentation during new business as well.
Very good. Number 3, Citizens Forum. Anyone here to speak on an item not on the agenda? Seeing that.
Mark Dingle again on the train locomotive, the UP 477. I think one of the ideas I think that could be considered for that locomotive is to relocate it to the Smoky Hill Historical Museum. It could be moved down the 4th Street tracks. It's not very far from the 4th Street tracks. They don't move these things very far from railroad tracks a lot of times when they locate them for obvious reasons. They're big and heavy pieces of equipment. And the 4th Street tracks roll by, a couple blocks maybe from the Smoky Hill Historical Museum. And it could be that, last time I suggested maybe Salina Union Station as a possibility. But it seems like, a fitting place for it could be to the east side of the Historical Museum or to the rear of the Historical Museum as a placement. It'd be quite a project to move that, but you could go most of the way down the tracks under its own wheel power. It's not, of course, it's not under steam, but I saw some of the minutes of the meeting. $35,000 seems pretty cheap for that locomotive. It's one of the older ones in existence. And there are a lot of those types that are still preserved, and there's some other ones like that are around Kansas, and I provided I think the director a website where you could find information about that locomotive, historical information, and you could see other locomotives around the United States and how they're displayed at parks and other facilities. I saw in the minutes of the meeting that one of the proposals is to return it to steam, and that would be great. Quite frankly, that would be great. That would draw a lot of interest. Especially if it were returned to steam in Salina. All we got to do is look at the Abilene and Smoky Valley operation over in 26 miles east of here and the draw that it has. But I do believe it would be quite expensive to bring that to steam. The boiler would have to be certified. Probably a number of the tubes in the boiler would have to be replaced, probably all of them. And being in the cab of that locomotive, all the knobs have been removed. There's some things that have been cut off the sand dome on the side. I went out and took extensive pictures of it. It appears that it was converted to an oil-fired locomotive, but if you look under the cab of that locomotive, you'll find 2 red wheels, metal wheels, and those were used to dump the firebox from ash out of the firebox. You would turn those wheels, and it would open doors under the firebox and dump ash out. So at one time it burned solid fuel, but it has been converted to oil. And I don't know who would be interested in restoring it to steam, but it sure would be a project, and it would take some time and dedication to do that. I just wanted, there's a website that shows how these things are displayed. I know there's a nice massive one over in St. Joseph, Missouri, a big, powerful passenger engine, and it is surrounded on all four sides by a high metal fence and a roof over the top of it to preserve it. So I just wanted to present you with those observations as to some alternatives for the disposition of the engine. I'm somewhat relieved that it seems like that scrapping it is not a consideration, because that would be truly tragic for that locomotive after 121 years to end up in with that disposition. I appreciate your time and consideration.
Thank you, sir. On to number 4, approval of our agenda. Take a motion to approve it. Thanks, Jim. In a second.
I'll second.
Melanie seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Minutes from our February 16th, 2022 Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting are in your packet and were provided by email as well. If there are no additions or corrections, I'd take a motion to approve those.
I'll motion we approve the minutes.
Thank you, Matt. In a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Activity reports, also in your packet. Questions from board members, comments from city staff?
I just want to highlight two things. You know, at Fieldhouse, we were very busy. February rentals, tournaments, kind of winding down our winter leagues. But had a first, and with me being a wrestling guy, I got my first wrestling really in there. We were kind of the host for Acacia to do their practices. Acacia, maybe you don't know, started girls wrestling, which is on the state tournament is on Wednesday, Thursday, and then the boys wrestled Friday, Saturday. Well, the boys were used to coming in the day before and getting their warm-ups and working out, making weight, that type of thing the night before. Well, with girls wrestling, they didn't have that opportunity. So USD reached out to them. They were great to work with, and they brought some mats over to the field house. And I could have missed a few teams, but there was 18 teams that I counted that came over there, got their workouts in, kind of a satellite location. So I thought it was a great addition, for our offerings.
Very good.
And then the last one was, I provided a picture there of Visit Salina, cooperated with them. We got a nice little greeting area and a nice little 67401 sign there right when you come to the field house. I think it adds a nice little touch to the facility.
I'm assuming it's pamphlets and all that, brochures of area stuff to do and whatnot when you're here, so it's good.
I would like to point out, for Salina Municipal Golf Course, just the rounds played for the month of February. You know, they had 1,255 rounds played. 5-year average is 888. So again, another warm, semi-warm weather month for above average golf play.
Very good. Any other questions or comments? Gentlemen? We'll move on to new business then. Item 7A, Smoky Hill River Renewal Update.
I'd like to introduce Jane Anderson.
What do you guys do here? Do I stand?
Andrea is going to control
Okay.
your presentation.
Sounds great. Okay, my name's actually Jane Anderson. I'm the executive director of the Friends of the River Foundation. A lot of times people think I work for the city, but I work for a 501c3, so there is really a separation. We've been the advocates for the Smoky Hill River Renewal since 2006, and this big boy project is actually going to happen. It has taken longer than we thought, but I'd like to explain why, and I'd like to tell you where it's at. And if you've been to the meeting, some of this will be a little bit of a repeat, but I think it's complicated enough. Most of the time, I had to go back and talk to Martha about 3 times to truly understand what's going to happen. It is a partnership with, we've been working with the city of Salina since then, and it's been a healthy collaboration. And you hear so many bad stories, but ours is a good story of getting along and working together. And we've also been working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and that does create a complicated story. And so that is why it's been so slow, but there's a reason why we've been waiting. So you can go ahead and flip it. Thank you. These are just some, probably can't really see much of this, but the Smoky Hill River actually ran throughout Salina for almost 7 miles. It goes right by downtown. The little dead stream bed in Oakdale Park was the original riverway. It comes in at the softball fields, and it goes all the way through Salina and ends up at Lakewood Park. That is the old riverbed. That was the original river that ran throughout Salina. And it was really an important place. There's 6 parks located on it, which you probably haven't ever thought about. And so they used it as a place to swim, fish. It was a place for picnicking. It was a place for community. So you can flip it. And the reason, you have a beautiful waterway, but you also have a lot of big floods. There was 4 big ones. The last huge one was 51. We would have been underwater in 93 without the dike. So, of course, you don't want to have flooding in your community. I love this photo because there's drinking beer in the floods. I guess there's always time for that. So you can keep rolling. This is a picture from, I can't remember the year, but you can see that it was actually a beautiful big river. It wasn't that small. And they had boats on it. They even had steamboats on it that carry about 35 people, which I'm still amazed at, that it could actually carry that kind of deal. So today, this is what you're left with. And the reason what happened after 51, people were, it had flooded a lot of the community. I understand that a lot of things were destroyed. My house that I live on iron. They said it had 4 feet of water and you could take a boat through it. Of course, that's very destructive. So then the Corps of Engineers was the partner in this, and they decided to put a big ditch actually on the east side of Salina, kind of like Wichita. And so they blew out the hillside. Whenever you see a straight riverway in the plains, that's actually not natural. And so you can really see what they did. When you go out on the Iron Avenue Bridge, you'll see it's very straight. It's also a problem out there. Rivers in the prairie are supposed to bend and curve, and it slows down the water. We have dirt banks. They've had huge problems with erosion out there and it runs too fast for the ducks and their babies. So I don't know that they would have done a straight riverway in this time period, but that's what they did. The original idea was that it was just supposed to take flooding water like Wichita's river does. And the old timers tell me different stories, but Bob Exline, I tend to believe him. He said that Salina was too cheap to do it the right way. And so they didn't do what they needed to keep the original riverway flowing as it should. So this is what you have now. You have a ruined ecosystem running all through some of the most important parts of your community. And the only water that you actually see in it is storm water. There's 78 storm drains on it. And so what that means, it's still playing a real essential piece of practical purpose. Without that, you would have flooding water again in Salina. So it's still critically important whether you believe in the project or not. So you can keep going. So in 2016, it came up for a vote, and it did pass, and we all know that's a miracle for a sales tax pass. And the Friends were the group behind that, and we were the ones running that campaign. The city of Salina, of course, couldn't do that. So this is just a quick little analysis of what people think are important. What we found really interesting is that the first love was they just want a river again, flowing water. And so obviously that's what we want too. But every time this has been surveyed, trails are number one. And that was true in the parks plan that you did a few years ago. Trails were what people want even more than, I think, athletic things. That really surprised me and confirms that this project is really what community people want. And I also believe visitors, okay? So where are we and where have we been since 2016? That's a long time ago. Well, what happened when this passed, the city hired a company called HDR to oversee the restoration project. And they had, and I'm the one that asked, do you have any connection with the Corps? Because I knew there could be money there. And they had a good relationship with them. And within weeks, we had a meeting with the Corps, and they were really interested in this project. And it fit very well with one of their projects called 1135, which is when the Corps goes back into a community to restore an ecosystem that they damaged accidentally, and this fits all that perfectly. So their purpose and the city's purpose are not necessarily the same, but they work together to create a river again. So that's what I call it a difficult marriage, that they have to get along enough to finally figure it out. And that's what's been going on for quite a while, honestly. What has been happening is preliminary engineering designs for the whole riverway was done by HDR for the city, and that took I can't remember, a couple of years at least. And then the Corps has been working on this project since then. I will tell you, I worked for colleges and I thought they were slow, but the Corps federal programs are slower yet. They call this their quick program. I don't think there is such a thing, but it is worth waiting for, and I will tell you why. What they bring to the riverway is what the city cannot afford to do. If they had to take out the silt, your biggest problem in that riverway is silt, because the water ran too slow. You have some dirt in your water. We're from a great place of dirt and earth and agriculture, and so it comes out of the water when it's slow. You have at least 8 to 10 feet of silt over on South Ohio that's totally blocked that bridge. You can't even see the culvert bridge anymore. It's gone. Well, it's there, but it's covered in dirt. So the biggest problem is really silt. And so what the Corps will do is because their mission is to create an ecosystem, they will dig it out with deep pools and riffles, where if the city was without the Corps, we'd dig a ditch, which means you would not have a living ecosystem, because it would not really support fish life in the same way. So you can see why we're waiting. Also, the way the Corps would dig it out will create a lot more years where you don't have to come and dig it out again, because it'll be deeper. Okay, this is your riverway, and you can just flip through. I'm going to talk about phase one. So what does the city dollars do, and what does the Corps dollars do? They're completely different. Remember, the Corps is about creating an ecosystem, and the city's about creating a place where their citizens would like to be proud of again, and create recreational and actually economic opportunities for people for restoration and redevelopment. So a lot of what that means is bridges. You have antique bridges on that riverway. Most of them are called a box bridge or a culvert bridge. I mean, it's a little box. And the one at South Ohio, the one that's silted in, is ruined and it has to be replaced. And alongside that is a trail on the east side of that riverway. We have now fundraised for a trail that will go on the west side, clear around the YMCA, but there's no connector. It's a really dangerous street. I was with the Trailblazers, and crossing that street is taking your life in your hands. It's not safe. So there'll be a pedestrian box when that riverway is coming in. So these are city dollars, what we're talking about right now. And so, although I do think the Corps, sometimes they will take out boxes. So anyway, you can go on. That's one of the projects. The other project that has to happen is Ash and Elm Street bridges are little box bridges that are too small to run a river again. And if there was a flash flood, it could back up into the community theater's basement, which of course is not a good idea. So these bridges are required to be replaced, and they will go from, they will go to a cement slab bridge is what you were looking at, which if you can go back, that's okay. It's okay if you can't go back. The slab bridge is a lifted bridge, but the cool thing about that lifted bridge, it also is an ecosystem upgrade, because fish hate to swim through tunnels. Because I heard that Kansas is really good at building slab bridges, and so there's companies that do that. And that one is really now here. It's at Greeley. It's a fairly new bridge. It's 5 or 10 years old maybe. So the bridges will look somewhat like that. Hopefully a little bit unique, each one for their neighborhood, depending on how much money we find. As you can see, there's like kind of tall grass on the sides. That was the steering committee's number one thing, that'd be low maintenance. So we'd like native grasses or native species, hopefully not tons of mowing. That is something we really try to move away from on these rustic areas. I don't see any problem with having some tall grasses that don't need mowing, or at least very little. You're welcome, Mr. Martin. Thank you. You're welcome. So The iron bridge, on the other hand, will be the most expensive bridge that will be replaced. It's a big fat faker. When you drive by, you think you're crossing like a slab bridge, but it's actually a culvert bridge that was poorly done. It backs up water, it doesn't run properly. It will be replaced with another slab bridge, but it will be twice as expensive as the others because it will be more beautiful. It will have an homage to the community Art Deco from downtown, try to pull those things right together. It's sitting, of course, right next to the downtown. You can keep going. And then, of course, the city, there needs to be something that's special that people would want a place to be. So we know the plaza is really important. The steering committee 100% wanted the most of the city's dollars to go right by downtown. This is a staircase that will be built right next to the bridge. The river will actually be shifted about 6 feet east because it's easier to do that than to actually work with the railroad. So from my experience at KW, I know that's absolutely true. So they just decided to move the river. Anyhow, what will happen then, there'll be a place for people to gather. We are short on dollars from the city. This will be a fundraising project in conjunction with some city dollars because we're running short of dollars on that project, but we all believe it's very critical to have something that's beautiful. So, that's okay? Okay, then, so what does the Corps do? So remember we talked about there's about ecosystem. What they do, and when I talk about the Corps doing the project, they actually don't do the project. They will outsource that. They try to use local businesses or businesses from Kansas. They try to spend the money as close to the community as possible. So what they actually do when that's talking about entrance works, that's actually creating a sediment base. And remember we talked about sediment being in the riverway. So what that means, there'll be a weir. So it's like a little thing that goes up and down, and it pulls the top of the river, which is the cleanest water, into these big dirt basins, and the water sits for a little and it floats out more of the sediment. It will then go into a water marsh. They'll go all around that soccer field. This is out by, what do you call those softball fields? Bill Burke softball fields. That's actually, if you go out there, it looks like a little tiny old creek because it's so silted in. But that's actually the original riverbed. So that soccer field will be a water marsh, which will actually become a bird watching place also. So all these places serve dual purposes. It's cleaning the water, it takes out phosphorus from agriculture, but those basins will actually, they think will be a really good fishing spot. They don't think they'll have to be dredged out probably every 5 years. And so they've tried to make this as practical as possible. So again, we're trying not to do a lot of maintenance on this. Okay. So we're talking about pools and riffles. This is just showing there'll be really shallow areas and then there'll be really deep pools. Shallow areas, the deepest I think it will be, can't remember exactly, but 5 or 6 feet. It could be a little deeper than that. And then you could have 3 to 4 feet or a couple feet. If you back by the boardwalk, that's a thing, a design from the plaza that goes right next to the riverway. The design is that if you fell in, it's 18 inches. Those are all well thought. The deep part is on the other side to help with drowning. So that's one of their ideas, so you can keep going. Oh, this is one of my favorite parts. There's an old dam from the milling days over by Community Theater, and that dam was brought in front of the steering committee if they wanted to save the history of that, or would they rather have boating? And this amazed me because we had all ages in that group, and 100% they all voted they wanted boating. The dam will go away. It's ready to collapse anyway at this point. And it's also, if it was really running, it would be a huge drowning hazard, which none of us want that. And so instead of that, this is part of the Corps project, and they'll build 2 2 feet, little mini dams, and you'll be able to have a boat shoot in the middle. So all the way from Iron Avenue to Front Street, there'll be 5 of these, which will create beautiful sound of water next to the downtown. It'll be a beautiful spot, and I think super popular. Okay, so we're talking about silt. Remember, we have to dig that out. One of the biggest problems when you do a project like this is where you're going to take the dirt. So one of the ideas that I think was really smart was to take most of it to Lakewood Park. And where was that going to go? As you know, the lake at one time was probably, would it have been twice as big as it is now? And what they'll do is they'll dump the dirt where the lake used to be, and it will create a hill and create a whole new geography for a trail system of hilly trail system right next to the lake. One of the ideas I hope that the Corps will have enough money to do is, at one time that the river, I don't know if you know this, connected to the lake, that's why it was bigger. Of course, there's no river to run into the lake. But if they reconnect the river, it will become 6 feet deeper and much bigger. And because of that, they'll create a whole new water marsh area around that hill. And if you turn the slide, I think it's in there. It will create these kind of cool little, they call them canoe trails through this. So it creates a whole new place for quality of life, but it's also quality for fish life. So a lot of the quality of life things go right along with the ecosystem, so it's a win-win for everyone. So that is what the Corps would do, and that's what the city would do. Did I take up all my time? That it? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to take too much time, but it actually, most of the questions are, when will this happen? Well, I've had different dates over the years, but I do believe what will happen this summer, they'll hire HDR to do final designs for, we know what project one is for the city. And then the Corps, if they get all their stuff together, we hope to sign a final contract with them in the fall for $10 million. So you can see why we've been waiting. We really can't afford not to wait. So the other thing that's happening, just to let you know this, sorry, taking all your time, but we're working on a RAISE grant right now with the city, HDR, and the Friends. We've fundraised for part of the project. And it is for $25 million, which is hard to believe. It's part of the infrastructure money that's coming through that was passed by the federal government. So we're very excited. This is a beautiful infrastructure project. We're actually going to ask for 7 bridges because I just showed you some of the bridges we have to do. There's other bridges we can't afford to do. So we're hoping that we get some of that. So that's what we're working on right now. There'll be other asks coming that we're going to be looking for other ways to find more federal dollars. But this one is a big, big project, so we hope that we can play in that field. So anyway, it is going to happen, and we hope maybe, if everything goes well, there could be a river by 2025. It's possible. So thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Jane. Any questions or comments from anybody? We'll move on to 7B and the Salina Tennis Operational Model Presentation and Recommendation.
I just have some introductory remarks prior to Salina Tennis Alliance giving you a presentation. Exciting times. Next Monday, construction does begin, so you'll see activity over there at Kenwood Park. But giving you a little brief history where we were and how we got to here. In 2018, conversations started regarding the poor conditions of existing tennis courts within the Parks and Rec system. And there were two meetings at the Parks and Rec Advisory Board in 2018 and 2019 about this subject. The Salina Parks and Recreation Master Plan also supports that those existing tennis courts are in poor condition. In September of 18 and March of 19, discussions were held regarding a proposed new tennis complex from Salina Net Generation at the former municipal pool site at Kenwood Park. On November 23rd of 2020, City Commission adopted a resolution declaring all areas eligible for naming rights within the Kenwood Park Midway Drive area. And the Parks and Rec Advisory Board recently heard on January 12th of this year from Salina Tennis Alliance regarding a naming initiative, and their fundraising efforts, and made a positive recommendation to support that. The City Commission approved that naming initiative on January 24th of this year. And construction, as I said, is about to begin. That facility is a public-private partnership between the City of Salina and Salina Tennis Alliance, with the cost predominantly being from private contributions to Salina Tennis Alliance and partially from the city. The tennis facility is being constructed on city-owned property, made available through the city-funded demolition of the former swimming pool and rodeo arena, and ownership would be retained by the city of Salina. The former swimming pool, bathhouse, and concessions buildings have been retained for current use as a city renovated bathrooms, while the remainder of the former pool house will be available for future development. Salina Tennis Alliance has proposed an operational model under which it will operate and manage the tennis facility with expanded tennis programming offered through its operational and tennis programming capabilities. And you'll hear from them today about that. The agreement is currently being negotiated between the City of Salina and Salina Tennis Alliance. But the annual plan and operational model from Salina Tennis Alliance is a significant part of the agreement, and they will be presenting to you that today. And I would like to invite them to do so.
Thanks, Jeff. Clark Renfro, Salina Tennis Alliance. Thanks for allowing us to be here today. We're going to kind of talk a little bit more on how this is going to work and give a little bit more detail of how this is going to be beneficial for the community and for all parties involved. We just kind of give you a little background, and I know I've been up in front of you before. We've been actively working on the construction of this facility for many years, so that's, as Jeff mentioned, coming to fruition. And early on, we discussed the opportunity for us to manage and operate a facility like that. And early on, we didn't really have the resources to do that. And throughout our kind of progression, we became more formalized and organized and had the resources to be able to do this. And certainly something that the city, I think, welcomed us to come up with a proposal and a plan, and I think we've done that, and so we'll outline that for you today. We've been had a lot of conversations with other models that the city's worked with, and for instance, First Tee and some of the baseball models, as well as soccer, field house. So we try to incorporate as much as we can into this and really put together a plan that makes sense, not only today, but will be sustainable long into the future. And so I'm going to turn it over to Liz Bothwell here, and she's going to kind of more or less go through our plan with what we've been discussing with the city and city staff and open it up to questions from there. So I'll turn it over to Liz.
Good afternoon. I'm Liz Bothwell, and I am the Director of Tennis for the Salina Tennis Alliance. I am here today to introduce you to our community-oriented operational model for the new tennis facility. I would like to start by pointing out that there are a couple of details that have changed since we submitted the presentation in the annual plan last week, mainly just in regards to mowing and who's going to mow between us and the city, certain areas of grass, and those details are being worked out right now. So as residents of Salina, we're really fortunate to have a facility that's nice right in our backyards. Growing a strong tennis program has a lot of benefits to the community besides the physical benefits. Having a strong community tennis program encourages the development of teamwork, social skills, sportsmanship, problem solving, and self-confidence within the community. With effective management of this new complex, these benefits can be felt throughout Salina for years to come. Our proposal today covers usage of the new tennis facility through accessible clinics, lessons, event, and court usage, in addition to court usage for tournaments, mixers, and social play. We feel that our model has the ability to emphasize the previously mentioned community benefits and more. As a nonprofit organization, we are driven by a shared passion for community impact through tennis, as evidenced in our involvement in raising the funds to construct this new facility. STA is led by our experienced board of directors made up of community leaders and tennis players. In addition to our board, we have USPTA certified professionals on staff, like myself, with the knowledge to make this facility and tennis program a success. In order to have a successful program, we need more than just a new facility. We need community members with passion, knowledge, and expertise for the game. If there's one thing I'm passionate about, it's tennis. I've been a teaching pro for the past 7 years, and my love for the game has only grown in that time. From implementing scholarship programs for youth to helping manage a 60-court municipal facility to running numerous programs, clinics, and tournaments, my goal has always been to reach as much of the community as possible with tennis. Our operational model is a very low-risk option for the city of Salina. We will be fully responsible for the new facility's operations, management, and maintenance. STA will be responsible for employing, managing, and supervising all staff necessary to utilize this new complex to its full potential. In order to give the city a level of oversight, we have worked to develop an annual plan for the city to approve. This gives the city an opportunity to oversee any financial expenditures and ensure that programming meets the city's standards for growing tennis here in Salina. This annual plan includes an overview of expected budget, programming, leagues, tournaments, and maintenance projects for the year. Funding for operating the facility will come from a mix of community support, donations, grants, and city contributions. As we are able to increase the revenue generated, the city contributions would be offset. Potential sources of revenue include league revenue, sales revenue, lesson and clinic fees, and grants and donations. Since our goal is not to turn a profit, but instead provide a service to the community, any net revenues would be retained within STA for future use on maintenance, scholarships, and programming. One of the largest benefits of being a nonprofit is that we qualify for various grants for free, rackets, nets, and other equipment for new players. In order to calculate our proposed budget, I used the demographics of Salina and the surrounding areas, including current youth enrollment in area schools and the current involvement in tennis in Salina. I also utilized my prior experience with running programs and tournaments to produce conservative figures on court fee, league, tournament, and programming revenue. Part of calculating these numbers was deciding on an operating season. Since these courts are outdoors, it will not be possible to use the courts during the entire year during the coldest and snowiest parts of the year. STA decided that a feasible operating season would be approximately 8 months from March to November. During this time, the facility will be staffed an average of 10 hours per day, depending on the weather and any holidays occurring. If for some reason the facility is not staffed during playable hours, the gates will be open and the usage of the courts will be free to the public. During the proposed operating season, 6 first-come, first-served courts at minimum will be available to the community at no charge. When this is coupled with the 4 courts at Jerry Ivy Park, we would actually have 10 free public courts for the community to utilize. The remaining 6 courts at the new facility will be open for reservations or for walk-ons for a reasonable fee of $5 per hour. In order to provide the best tennis playing experience possible to everyone in this community, all facility guests will check in with the front desk prior to playing. This not only helps keep track of who is on site and on what courts, but it also helps to determine the busiest times of the year and the busiest days throughout the seasons. We plan to offer both private lessons and group clinics. Private lessons will be available to schedule at the player's convenience with an experienced teaching professional. Rates for private lessons will be determined on specific teaching professionals' levels of experience. One of the core tenets of our operational model is that we will provide high-quality and affordable programming to adults and youth of all ages and skill levels, from the first-time recreational player to experienced and competitive players. Our junior programming will be year-round and will include summer camps. In order to make tennis attractive to all ages and levels, we will provide scaled-down equipment in accordance with the USTA's recommendations. Using scaled equipment based on the player's height and experience encourages Salina's youth players to stick with tennis because the fundamentals are easier to grasp. Court size, net height, ball size, and racket length are all appropriately adjusted to promote proper form and make tennis easier to learn. A huge part of actually getting area youth out on the tennis courts for the first time is community outreach. Through partnerships with area schools, the Parks and Rec Department, local youth groups, and through neighborhood outreach and events, we'll be able to reach every corner of this community. Being able to advertise programs with the help of the Parks and Rec Department will help make the community more aware of tennis. If a parent goes to sign up their child for football or basketball, they'll see that tennis is available at an affordable price and maybe give it a try. For adults, we will also offer programming for all experience levels, from the completely new beginners to the competitive players of Salina. In order to reach as much of the community as possible, different kinds of clinics will be available on varying days and times. In addition to the weekly programming that we'll offer, we will also offer fun recreational mixers and events for adults on some Friday nights and weekends. Our program pricing structure is aligned to reflect our ultimate goal of making tennis affordable and accessible to all members of the community. We are able to keep fees low through the utilization of available grants and donations and support. Pricing clinics in bulk also helps keep costs down. For juniors, clinics will range from $750 to $1790 per clinic and between $875 to $1250 for adults. In addition to providing our programs at an affordable rate, we will also offer scholarships funded by community sponsors and donors in order to create an accessible program that everyone is able to enjoy. Aside from clinics and lessons, we will also offer opportunities for leagues and social play. Leagues in particular encourage the social and team aspects of tennis. We will offer both competitive and recreational leagues for adults and juniors. This will help make tennis more appealing to youth who would normally lean towards team sports, such as football or soccer, and will also encourage involvement in their school teams. Finally, we will also host and offer a variety of tournaments, ranging from local and regional tournaments for adults and juniors to high school and college tournaments. Hosting tournaments in Salina will provide opportunities for local players that would not exist otherwise. Having to travel to Wichita or Kansas City to compete can be quite a burden on working parents or families with multiple kids. Likewise, holding college events here will also help to inspire younger players by providing them with opportunities to watch high-level tennis in person. The benefit of hosting tournaments here also spans across the community. The economic impact and increase to tourism in Salina will be felt across area restaurants, hotels, and businesses. To maximize this benefit, we will coordinate scheduling with the Salina Area Chamber of Commerce. Since this is a public facility, we recognize that there needs to be a priority of usage for court time. It is important to place programming at the top of this list, followed by usage by USD 305, Kansas Wesleyan, and the general public. In conclusion, our operational model provides the City of Salina with the resources and expertise necessary to effectively utilize this facility at a cost that would be less than that of managing it in-house. Thank you for your time today.
And in your packet is also the annual plan that Liz spoke to.
I have a couple questions that came to mind as we were going through the presentation there, if I could. First off, the Board of Directors, how is that established and maintained in the future? And I guess as I kind of guiding through that, one thing that stuck out to me is there's no city staff or no city representation on that Board of Directors.
Right. So the board was originally created for construction. And so there's kind of been an evolution whereby we've established that entity. And then going forward, our plan is to have a board, have an advisory board that's made up of the constituents around town, whether that's USD 305, the city, Westland, another entity. But that's our goal, is to have representation from the entire community. So at this level, since we've just established ourselves in August to get the courts constructed, that's our game plan, is to have that all-inclusive community effort involved in this entity.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's just the things that are going through my mind. You guys have done a great job getting that together. It's just.
Thanks.
And then I didn't know if there was a term with the agreement. For example, it's a great plan now, but 10 years from now.
Sure.
Is it readdressed? Is it
Yeah.
be married forever?
Yeah, so we've talked to the city staff. I don't know if, Jeff, you want to address that? or-
As I stated earlier, there is active negotiations between Salina Tennis Alliance and the City of Salina. What is being proposed is, I believe, a yearly basis, and that's why you see an annual plan. The annual plan would be reviewed yearly with city staff, with Salina Tennis Alliance, and and everybody else Clark mentioned.
Yeah, and I think we want to establish metrics, because as a citizen, and being on the other side of the fence, I think I'd want to see how is this going to work. So we know that we've got to prove ourselves and say, hey, this is the model we want to put in place, and here's how we see it working, and make sure we do what we say and say what we do. If it doesn't, then we've got to adjust or do something different. So we know that, and we've got to establish that term.
Cool. Good deal. I'd hope you'd go more than a year. I think it'll take more than a year to figure all those things out.
Oh, I'm sure we will. I think that's what, like Clark mentioned, it's the opportunity to have the discussion
Yeah.
and fine tune what we're doing well, improve what we're not doing. That's my take.
And the nice thing about Liz, she comes from a facility in Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, over 60 courts. And so she's been there, done that, and brought in college events, Southeastern USTA events. We've got a winner here. And so this, we've got a group of individuals as well as a community that's supportive of tennis. This will be one of the finest tennis centers in the Midwest, if not the country, when it's all said and done. I mean, there's a lot that's happening here, but that's our vision.
Any other questions or comments? You're looking from us today.
A recommendation of the annual plan and operational model that was provided by Salina Tennis Alliance. Of the proposed annual plan.
Okay.
So a recommendation.
And there's more, as you said before, there's more that's still being negotiated between the city and Salina Tennis Alliance.
The legal agreement, if you will,
Okay.
which a lot of the basis of that is what you were presented to today.
Okay. Questions or comments from anybody else?
I'm just kind of curious. I haven't heard any mention of it. I think it's more for the city than the tennis association. What are they going to do with all the other tennis courts that they have? Are they going to keep some of them? Are they going to remove them, or how's that going to do?
I anticipated your question.
Okay.
I'll get a little closer. Jerry Ivy courts are now that area where Jerry Ivy courts are at, that area has been leased to the school district. And they are planning on renovating those courts. There's 4 existing courts there, and they're planning on renovating those or removing those and putting in new. And there's also adding 4 additional courts for school use. So 4 would remain public, 4 would be school use. The courts at Oakdale are in Oakdale and Sunset Park. The surfacing is not the greatest. It's actually could be considered by some to be unplayable, where the surface is cracked and there's separation of surfacing. We are in the process of not doing rentals there. We're not purposely putting people in those spaces except for the south courts at Oakdale. Those are in pretty good shape. There's a concrete base there with some surfacing that is cracked, but it's safe to play, so that's still maintained. The thought process and for those south courts at Oakdale are to look at a pickleball option or multi-court option, and we're looking at that for the future. Sunset courts are in significantly poorer shape. And this is, that's why I kind of started off some of my comments by, there was a lot of data shared with the board, advisory board and the city commission about what shape they're in pictures. Sunset courts are not in good shape. And we are looking at options for that space to include a potential parking lot, a shelter. We're looking at options for that space. You know, Sunset Park is one of our major destination parks. And we have a demand for parking in Sunset Park. We don't have any ADA parking at all. And there's also could be some parking there to support Bondi Fields, which get used for practices often throughout the summer months. So that's an option that we're looking at. Does that answer your question, Mr. Richardson?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions, comments? Someone want to make a motion?
I would make a motion that we recommend to city the agreement or the moving forward with the Salina the tennis facility management proposal with Salina Tennis Alliance. However, I would like to just restate those reservations that on the board of directors and understanding that, and maybe even a recommendation that someone from the city be a part of that board of directors.
Second.
I'll second it.
Got Denny. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all. Another step along the way. It'll be exciting to see construction Monday, so. On to item 7C, remove the Kenwood Park train ramp recommendations.
So I took this, Mr. Dinkle is here. Thank you for speaking. He's our train expert. Not ours, but I just want to make sure the board understands that we don't have any intention at this time of removing a train. We were looking in and being thorough and having the conversations with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. But we would like to propose and answer your questions, if you have any, relating to removing the direct access to the train cavity by removing the ramp that leads up to that space. And if Rick, and we did include several pictures that Rick took, and I would like to pass it over to Rick in case he has any additional things to share that I probably missed.
No, not a whole lot. Like Jeff said, we looked at several different options. We wanted to kind of explore both ends of what the possibilities are. So for right now, to move forward, in order to kind of satisfy risk management and to help prevent some vandalism and the possibility of somebody crawling on it and falling off, the proposal is to remove the ramp. We'll just continue with the chain type fence on here. Naturally, we know that's not going to keep everybody out, but at least it will help deter some of the activity that goes on there. We'll do the removal in-house. We actually have developed a plan where we can kind of recycle that ramp and use it for something else, for some storage of, we've got several buckets for our skid loaders and stuff like that, and just kind of make a storage facility or a storage rack for some of those. So it won't just go to the scrap iron, it will reuse it to some extent. So right now, that's what we're asking for.
Have we had injuries there?
You know, nothing that's been reported, not in my tenure here, but it's also one of those where we have signs on there that say, don't climb on the train, and my guess is that when people fall off the train, they maybe don't report it because there's clearly signs that say, don't crawl on the train. So I really can't answer that. I don't know if there has or has not been.
I guess the other thing that comes to mind with me is it's a pretty extravagant ramp. And I remember a time when there wasn't a ramp there. So do we know how we got to that point?
You know, I can't answer that either. And this is strictly speculation, but was to provide access to a feature in a park. And just as I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, but said that a number of pieces have been removed from that. There's been part of the vandalism there is not just spray painting, but it's just continually tearing and removing parts of it. So hopefully this will help prevent any more of that.
What's the timeline on like additional fencing or plans there?
Well, right now, we don't have any money in the budget to put a bigger fence around here. Estimates I got, now keep in mind this is several months ago before prices shot through the roof, but we're looking at $11,000 to $14,000 to put a 6-foot fence around that with a gate so we can have access to get in and take
Mm-hmm.
trash and stuff out, but that was where we were with that. So my guess is, unless Jeff comes up with some money, that we may have to, we're coming up on the 2023 budget cycle pretty soon, that we could include some money and ask for something to put up a correct fence around there.
I struggle understanding how it's safer without a ramp.
I kind of agree until more substantial fences there. You're swapping problems on,
I don't know if it's going to make it safer, to be honest with you, but we'll have less access to the inside the cavity unless somebody just wants to go in there and crawl on the train, which, like I said, I'm sure that there will be some that will do that, but
I feel like if you're crawling on the train to vandalize it, you're going to do it regardless of the ramp.
probably.
Or even kids walking through the park, I guess I would see they're going to walk over that little chain and go climb on it versus walking up the ramp to get there.
The ramp would make it easier for them.
Pardon me?
I said the ramp would make it easier for them. The way you just have to walk, you gotta crawl. Some are too lazy to walk, crawl up.
I think of grandparents with children, or grandchildren. You know, and the grandkids want to see up in the train, and they're climbing up in there to be with them versus walking up the ramp. I guess maybe
I believe, based on our conversations, this was a balance of managing risks associated with the train versus keeping the aesthetics of the park intact and not having the fence. Some of the concerns that I believe were brought forward were how it would look with a fence, and it would lose that character. It would lose some of that picture opportunity. I believe this is presented to you with a balance with both of those in mind.
And I think somebody that is really determined to get up there, a 6-foot fence is probably not going to deter them either. I mean, they'll find a way. We have people drag picnic tables all over the place and stack them up and use those for ladders to get up on things. So if somebody's really determined, I think they're going to find a way to get in there and do something.
So is there currently a sign that says stay off the train,
Yes.
but we still have a ramp up to the train?
Yeah, and basically it's just the ramp goes up to the inner cavity of the workings of it, but we still have, even once they get up there, they crawl over and crawl all over the train. So even with the signs that say to stay off.
Is the consensus that we just want to leave the train where it's at and not think about future moving it someplace else?
I think so. I mean, a lot of it has to do with funding, of course, of, you know, what's available to do something with it. And is there, are there entities that would be interested in it? You know, I've only talked to one. And I think at this point, just kind of the feeling I get is to leave the train and limit access to it, and then just kind of go from there. It's going to be quite expensive to try and move it, whether we move it to the museum or the train station, or if somebody wants to move it elsewhere. So those conversations were just very preliminary, just to see kind of a what-if type thing. There really hasn't been any discussion or hard discussion saying, yes, we want the train out. The information was gathered just for discussion purposes only.
Nice pictures.
It's amazing what you can do with these things anymore.
To follow up on that, I believe the consensus is to the city should keep the train. And there could be a future opportunity, maybe like Mr. Dinkle had presented, whether it be the Historical Society or a future Union Station Depot space. I think that'd be cool, but preference is right now to keep the train at Kenwood Park. Make it safe and make it presentable for pictures and for people to enjoy the park.
other questions, comments?
I guess I personally would like to see a little bit better plan on that. Whether it's the ability to do another fence, I really feel like we're not solving a problem by removing the right now.
I would agree. I think you're just changing what the problem is. It is on our agenda for recommendation. If someone wants to make a motion to some effect.
There's certainly, I mean, you know more than I do, certainly other motions that could be made, whether it be to postpone or to give further direction or to.
Yeah, I will motion that we postpone until more information about what we're going to do with the train or how we're going to block it off until that's done.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion or comments? All of those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So just so I'm clear, the information you wish to gather are current, maybe some updated fence quotes?
Plan and an inclusion of it on a budget of, on a fiscal year 23 budget or something.
Okay.
I would,
But what about the ramp?
I mean, one concern would be that if you remove the ramp, obviously that's an ADA access.
Correct. Yeah.
Is that opening you up to issues? I'm not smart enough to know that answer, but if the train is still there and it's able to be visited by us, and yet we remove the ramp, would that be an issue?
If I'm answering the question, that means I know.
I know,
what's-
so don't answer.
I know the answer, so I don't know the answer,
Okay.
so.
I'd be curious to see if the ramp was removed, is it going to be as inviting to climb on the train? You know, when I look at the picture with the ramp right there, it kind of makes me think, wow, I can go right out up there and mess around on the train.
I think people have climbed on the train for 20 years and all of a sudden the ramp's gone. You're like, well, I've still been on the train, so there's a nice ladder here that looks like I could amble up and I just, without like the next step of protection or deterrent, I just don't feel like it's going to do anything. So,
And maybe digging too deep, I'd kind of be interested in how the ramp got there. I remember as a kid there being.
there wasn't no ramp,
there.
yeah. Maybe part of the river channel could go around it, or it could be put on some sort of island with the, that might be more inviting, actually, I guess.
Yeah, where's Jane?
You know, it was interesting, Jane did mention at a presentation, she alluded to it today, that it's easier to move a river than it is a train track.
Nothing under old business, unless city staff has anything to add. Any general announcements for the good of the cause? Take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Thanks, in a second.
I'll second.
Thank you, sirs. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried unanimously. Thank you so much for joining us.